The day you fall in love with you is the day the world will fall in love with you.
Meet Naveen Jain.
He's an entrepreneur and philanthropist who came to this country with $5 in his pocket and turned it into billions.
Heard you're trying to go to the moon. I was like, who is this guy? Let me learn more.
In his own words, he wants to make illness a choice.
You're literally taking people to the moon, right?
I can give you $100 million right now, no questions asked. Or I'll give you $1 today, and every single day for the next 30 days, I will double it for you. People in their mind say, oh, sure. How am I going to get to $100 million ever? Not happening, right? I'll take $100 million. Without realizing 30 doubling later, it is $1 billion. That thinking is just very difficult for human mind.
So how do we get there? How do we train people to think that way?
So how you train is actually
Naveen, thanks so much for coming on the show.
well, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's been a joy watching you speak. Your keynote was yesterday here at the Biohacking Conference. And one of the things that really shook me that I've seen you talk about, but it's the quality of the questions we ask that determines the quality of our lives. Mm-hmm. Can you explain how you even learn to ask better questions when it comes to life and business?
Yeah. So first of all, anything you do in life that's worth doing, it takes a lot of energy. So whether you do something small or whether you do something large, a lot of people get so scared. Oh my God, this is so big, it's so audacious. Who am I to do that? And it turns out the bigger ideas are actually easier to do than the smaller ideas. And the reason for that is very simple. The smartest people want to work on the toughest problems. The people who are successful, they want to work on things that become legendary. They want to work on things that will make them significant. They don't want to work on something small. They want to solve the problem that if they are successful, can change the trajectory of how humanity is going to live, right? So when you tell someone, hey, I want to build an iPhone app that will help you find a roommate, they say, great, have fun doing it, good luck. When you tell someone, I'm going to change the way people understand their health, I'm going to go settle on the moon or Mars or beyond, people say, really? So how are you going to do that, right? And now they are willing to work with you because you have this audacious vision. You have the resources and you're willing to dedicate decades of your life to solving this problem. You guess what happens? When you get the smartest people to come together, the money follows because every venture capitalist, what are they saying? Unbelievable opportunity. Look at the team that you have assembled. We want to invest in you. So all starts with that big, audacious idea. You put together a great team because they all want to solve that big problem. And the money comes because you now are solving a big problem and you have a great team, right? So suddenly everything starts to fall in place. Now, how do you know that your idea actually is worth pursuing? And, having done this many times, I ask myself 3 questions. Why this? Why now? And why me? So don't worry, I'm going to answer your question.
Yes.
Why this is really simple. Why this is about, God forbid, you're actually successful in solving the problem that you set out to do. Would it help 1 billion people live a better life? And as I've always said, it's not about because you say, hey, I'm a philanthropic person, I want to help 1 billion people. Of course, we all want to do that. Right. But really, from a capitalist perspective, anytime you can solve any problem that makes life better for 1 billion people, you have these billion customers that end up helping you create a $100 billion company. Right? But you don't wake up in the morning and say, I want to make $100 billion company. What do I do? You don't. That is making money is a byproduct of doing things that actually improve people's lives. Right? So that's simple. Number 2 is why now? And this is about people say, oh, some people have a crystal ball and they're able to always find the next thing to do. Sure. Well, that turns out it is really, you don't need a crystal ball for it. There are 2 or three ways I've always found a great way to look at the things. One is look at what is changed in the last couple of years. And what do you see the trend happening that will change in the next 3 to 5 years that will allow you to actually solve the problem at scale in 3 to 5 years?
So not now. You have to think. It may not be the hot thing now.
It may not be the hot thing now. But what is going to be then 3 to 5 years because of these technologies that are coming up? The convergence of technologies, what problems can be solved in 3 to 5 years that couldn't have been solved 5 years ago, right? So if you think about it and saying, what are the things, the AI is getting more and more powerful. Right. Sensors are getting smaller and more powerful. We're going to have massive amount of data. What problems can I solve in the next 3 to 5 years that couldn't have been solved a decade ago, right? And then suddenly you start to see what is going on. Other things I do is I read a lot. So I spend, in the morning 2-3 hours reading about every single subject. And the reason is, number one, anytime you start to see lots of research papers being published on anything, and that's starting to see more and more people are starting to say, well, this thing works this way, this thing works this way. And you start to say, well, if it is happening in the lab and it's becoming more and more people are starting to prove it, it's going to become the trend in the next 3 to 5 years.
Sure.
Right? So you start to look at what's coming in the lab and what's becoming more and more frequent. And in 3 to 5 years, it's going to be commercialized.
Where in the lab, though? I mean, most people are probably reading articles online, but,
But that's what I do. So, but think about it. Online, you can read about anything, right? Yeah. You can read about porn and waste your life, or you can read about nature, the science magazine.
Sure.
So I set my Twitter feed to all the science magazines. So only thing I see in my Twitter feed is not, what Musk is saying today. I see about what's the latest paper on nature, what's the latest paper in science magazine, what's the latest paper on neuroscience, what's the thing on quantum physics. And then I read not one book or 2 books or 3 books. I read half a dozen to dozen books on the same subject.
Simultaneously while...
No, serially.
Or serially.
And the reason I do that is if you read one book, the author's view becomes your view.
Right.
If you read 10 books, you have 10 different point of views, and then you are able to collect these dots and make your own point of view by listening to 10 people, and that becomes your unique perspective that no one else has, right? Because you're able to superset all the knowledge now.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Experts will never listen to each other, but you get to actually now listen to all the experts and create your own view as a non-expert. Right?
Sure.
So this is really how I always found the right trend, right? So when, 15 years ago, when people said, why go to the moon? I said, that's the next logical step. Well, been there, done that. Nobody wants to do that. Then look at now. Everybody wants to go to the moon. We saw that trend 15 years ago.
Was that the right time, though? You said, why this? Why now?
Yeah, the time was because at that point, we started to see that rocket propulsion technologies were getting cheaper and cheaper. It took us $1 billion to go to the moon. We were starting to see you could get to the moon for $10 million because you can build these smaller rockets.
1% of the cost.
1%. And that's a massive shift when you start to see you can 3D print your rockets. You can make the rockets very modular. You don't have to have a one big rocket. You can actually make them multiple shift rockets. And that's why we say, look, there is a trend that's happening that we can take advantage of, right? Same thing, and so anyway, same thing happened on when I started Viome. We saw that tremendous amount of research was coming out on microbiome and many human health. We're saying, look, this thing is really starting to happen. 5 years later, Lady Gaga is talking about microbiome. That tells you something.
That's how you know it's literally like a popular thing, right? When Lady Gaga starts tweeting about crypto or microbiome, that's how you know everybody in the whole world is talking about it.
So coming back to the question you were asking me, that's the last. Why me? And why me is about what questions are you asking that are different from what everyone else in the industry is asking. So questions you ask is the problem you solve. So I think, as yesterday I was giving in my talk, that there are many, you can literally ask any question and how do you actually apply different questions, reframe that question, right?
Yeah.
You say, hey, climate change, is it about fossil fuel or could it be solved by actually stopping the lightning fires, forest fires from lightning? Can we stop the volcanoes from erupting? Is it about solving hunger problem by creating more food distribution of things? Yes and yes and yes. But what if we find why people eat food? And what if we solve that? Because the only reason they eat food is because they need energy or they need nutrition.
Right. Just to go back to the question.
Yeah.
It seems the thing that you have demonstrated in terms of the pattern of the way you think is that you think in a non-linear way. And I would imagine most humans, just the way we've been wired, think linearly. Like we can't see exponential progress. We can't see that $1 billion is going to get to 10 million because of the fact that we think linearly. That's why people thought COVID wasn't going to spread as fast, because the idea of it spreading from a network effect it's kind of hard to think about. It's just not the way we're thinking.
But that is absolutely true. So I think the power of exponential thinking is very different, right?
Yeah.
And it's very interesting. You ask people, if you were to take 30 steps, how far will you go? Almost everyone can get very close to 30 steps. Where will you be? And you tell them, take 30 exponential steps. That means take 1 step, then you take 2 steps, then you take 4 steps, then you take 8 steps, right? How far will you go if you were to take 30 additional exponential steps? And more people say, oh, maybe downtown.
Right.
16 times around the earth.
That's so crazy.
Right? Same thing, by the way, you ask people, hey, I can give you $100 million right now, no questions asked. Or I'll give you $1 today, and every single day for the next 30 days, I will double it for you. People in their mind say, oh, sure, like $1, 2, 4, 8, 16, $32. I'm still looking dollars. $64, $128, $256, $512, $1,000. How am I going to get to $100 million ever? Not happening, right? I'll take 100 million. Without realizing 30 doubling later, it is $1 billion, right? You can't get there because in the beginning, it looks tiny, tiny, tiny until you hit the knee of the curve and boom, it goes up, right? That thinking is just very difficult for human mind.
So how do we get there? How do we train people to think that way?
So how you train is actually understanding that you don't extrapolate the linear thinking. You plot them on a log curve. On a log curve, everything becomes exponential. So it looks linear on a log curve, but it's actually exponential at that point, right? So how you look at the stuff and saying, look at, for example, this is really interesting. The company that invented the digital camera was a company that actually went out of business because of digital camera, Kodak.
Yeah.
So Kodak actually invented a digital camera. And when the scientists came to the board and said, we have invented this digital camera, it is going to be a 1 pixel camera or 1 megapixel camera. People laughing at them. It's like, are you crazy? Who would ever use that? We got these beautiful chemical films. Without realizing, guess what? It's going to continue doubling. And 5 years, 10 years later, it drove them out of business, right? So this is a idea we tell all people is that don't get Kodaked, right? Right? Because idea is when you do not look at the trend of where the trend is going, you will actually get disrupted. And you always talk about where did that come from? Never saw it coming. Suddenly people 5 years ago start saying, oh, this 3D printing is so new, it's going to change the world. And I told them that 3D printing actually started 30 years ago. So much so all the patents on 3D printing are already expired.
Wow.
It has been that long.
Yeah.
People look at this Chat GPT. Oh my God, the generative AI is going to take over the world. It was invented 17 years ago.
What was that?
LLMs.
Yeah, LLMs in general.
In general, the algorithm for LLMs were until the processing power caught on, all of the stuff that needed to happen, the money that needed to be poured in for actually training these LLMs. I mean, it costs $100 million every time you train LLM, right? Right. And now LLMs are very limited in their feature set. They, by definition, they're large language model. They work for serial data. So audio, video, languages, they do a great job. But they would never work on random data. They're not designed for that. So somehow when people say, hey, AI is going to somehow wipe out the humanity, you start to ask yourself the question, how would that happen? People start to say, well, it's going to someday become artificial general intelligence. That's a long time out. LLMs are not going to get you there. You need a completely different architecture to get to the AGI. And would it be the humans versus AI, or will be humans plus AI that is actually going to win?
Right.
You know, in all of these things, you have to look at the, questions from a very, very different perspective. Now, one of the dumbest questions when people say is, hey, your grandma died 10 years ago. Do you believe she's still alive? And people really take philosophical approach to it. Her energy is still around. And that actually is true. Because we as humans, this totally tangent subject, we as humans are made of what? Atoms. What are atoms made of? Electrons and protons. What are they made of? Quarks. What are they made of? Energy. So we are literally a floating energy. Even though when I touch myself, it feels solid. But we know it's not.
Right.
Your brain is being fooled by our haptic sensor, thinking and believing in something that is not real. Even though we all look one person, it is just a floating energy. What happens when we die? The energy never dies. It becomes part of universal energy. When the new person is born, you take the portion of the energy gets manifested again. What do you call that? Reincarnation. Right? So it's not a religious term. It is just how energy works. It just gets reformed. So there is a piece of everything that's in you. Now, when you say, is your grandmother dead? Depends who you're asking. So let's assume she died 50 years ago. If you ask someone who lives just 100 light years away, when they're looking down on Earth, they're seeing your grandmother walking as a young woman. Right?
Perspective.
For them, they still see that because it took light 100 years to get to them. So when we look at the stars, it looks real to us. They may be dead because it took them light took 1,000,000 years to get to us.
Yeah.
So they'll all be dead, right? So point is, just because we see something doesn't it believe, you have to believe it. Now imagine completely different tangent. Our sensors are connected to our body. I see you, I hear you, I smell the room, I can touch the thing. And my brain believes that's what I'm here. Now imagine if my sensors were remote, just like wireless. My eyes were somewhere, my ears were there, my nose was there, my touch was there. Brain doesn't know the difference when its signal goes to the brain in the dark. It doesn't know where it's coming from. It will believe you are in Paris because it sees Paris, it smells Paris, it's seeing the people, it's everything. You could be in Paris sitting here because your sensors are telling you that's where you are. Now imagine if you can be in sensors in multiple places simultaneously feeding your brain. You could be in two places at the same time. So my mom used to say, you can't be in two places at the same time. Maybe mom wasn't thinking exponentially yet.
Right. And this kind of goes back to, this idea of perspective, right?
Yeah.
Someone might think that something is possible and someone based on their own experience versus someone that may have a limited mindset, may not be able to, or they don't have that experience too. So the third question to why is why me?
Why me?
And this is something that a lot of people struggle with. There's a quote by Rumi, the poet, and she said, yesterday I was clever, so I try to change the world. Today I'm wise, and I'm changing myself. So before we think that exponentially and think about changing the world, there's a lot of self-work that I feel entrepreneurs or visionaries need to do to make sure they're solving the right problem. So how do we become self-aware to know what problems to solve in the first place?
I think, first of all, what problem you care about solving. So it's not, so there are a lot of theories around how you look at that. So one is, does it matter to me that solving this problem is personal to me, that I am willing to dedicate 2-3 decades of my life to solve it?
That long, right? That long-term thinking.
My point, you have to be willing to do that because sometimes problems are just not easy to solve.
Yeah.
But you have to willing to dedicate 10, 20, 30 years of your life to solving a problem.
How long has been Viome for you?
7 years.
7 years,
Yeah.
right?
So point is you have to be prepared to dedicate decades of your life to solving a problem. Now, second thing is ask yourself, what are you willing to die for? And then live for it, right? What are the things that you're not just passionate about, you're truly obsessed about solving? Because passion is for hobbies, right? I am passionate about collecting space rocks, right? That's great. But I'm obsessed about solving the healthcare problem. Why do people get sick? How can we prevent the humanity from developing these chronic diseases? Because at the end of the day, every one of us suffers through that. Why does it have to be that way? Why? What if we can solve that problem? Right? And that is the thing that, why me? So I can apply, my current moonshot is Viome. And I can apply the same thinking of why this, why now, why me? And then I'll tell you how to actually think about it. So first thing we ask ourselves was, what if we actually can understand what changes in the human body at the onset of a chronic disease, cancer, or aging? What changes in the human body during progression of these diseases? If we can find out what causes the onset and progression of these diseases, we could one day prevent them from happening, stop the progression of them, and if we get really lucky, reverse them, right? And that was our concept. If we can do that, would it help 1 billion people live a better life? The answer was 8 billion of us, check mark, good. Next thing was, why now? And we say, look, to solve this problem, there are multiple things need to happen. We have to be able to digitize the human body. The cost of digitization of just one single sample 7 years ago was almost $1,000.
Wow.
And we said, wow, $1,000, that's not scalable. But it came down from millions of dollars. And in next 3 to 5 years, I have no doubt it will come down to $100 because the cost of sequencing will just continue to come down. Guess what? Not only it came to $100, it came down to about $12. So while we thought we were 10 times optimistic, it turns out we were actually 7 or 8 times pessimistic.
Right,
and that even though you thought we were 10 times 10x, turns out you still were underthinking.
Even as an exponential thinker, you were undershooting what it cost.
Right?
Yeah.
Second thing was we said, look, even if we could sequence and get all this massive amount of data, how would we process this massive amount of data? So we launched the thing and said we could use a cloud server. And we actually did the thing the first time on a cloud, fired it up, and it took $45 worth of processing to process the data. We took a deep breath and said, that can't scale. But guess what? It used to be hundreds of dollars. I think in the next 3 to 5 years, it will come down to $10. It came down to $1.50. Right? And there we were. I mean, we knew the trends were in the right direction. We still were undershooting that, right? But the point was we were in the right direction that we could make this work.
Sure.
Third thing was, would AI actually become powerful enough to be able to actually make sense of this massive amount of data? And there was no doubt in anyone's mind that AI was moving at a speed, it will be there. So we just said, great, let's go do it. And that's why the timing fit perfectly. The last part was, why me? I am not a scientist or a biologist. And I looked at the industry and seeing everyone in the industry is asking the same question. I want to know about your DNA. I want to know about your human genes because that's the software of human body. And if we knew that, we can find the problem. And I said, wait a sec. Your DNA never changes when you gain 200 pounds. Your DNA doesn't change when you become diabetic. Your DNA doesn't change when you get depression. Your DNA doesn't change when you have heart disease. In fact, your DNA doesn't change after you die. You can look at DNA of a Tutankhamun. You can look at DNA of a dinosaur. It's the same DNA. Really? So if DNA can't even tell you you're dead or alive, how will it ever tell you you're healthy or sick? So we said that's the wrong question people are asking. What changes all the time is your RNA, your gene expression. So your genes don't change, but your gene expression is always changing. So people say, what the hell is this gene expression? What is this RNA? Well, it's really simple. Every part of our body is identical DNA. You can do DNA of my hair, my skin, my nose, my nails, my eyes, my kidney, my heart, the same DNA. Why is it I don't have the eyes growing on my fingers, nails growing on my hand? Same DNA. The expression changes and the same DNA can become anything we want. So I look at DNA as an alphabet and RNA is the story you're writing. So what story are you writing with your life? Don't blame your ancestor. Blame the story you're writing with your life every single day. And we say, what if we can do RNA? Second part was actually interesting. We started to see in the research that every single disease, the researchers were finding some microbiome involvement. So if you Google today microbiome and diabetes, microbiome and cancer, microbiome and cancer therapy, microbiome and addiction, microbiome and depression, every single disease was being connected to microbiome. My first reaction was, wait a sec. If everyone believes this is a problem and there are tens of companies doing microbiome testing, then why is this problem not being solved? Went back to the first principle. What questions are they asking? And it turns out, to date, every single microbiome company is asking the same wrong question. They want to know about what organisms are in your gut, Sean's gut, what organisms are in Naveen's gut. If two people have diabetes, they must have same organism. Well, it turns out thousands of different organisms can produce exactly the same thing that's making you sick. So it's not about who they are, it's about what they are producing. And what we learned was same organism in one environment can produce something good, and same organism in a tough environment can produce something toxic. Just like a human being, you take a person, put them in a good environment, good behavior, put them in a bad environment, bad behavior. So I go back to my Gandhi principle. Punish the sin, not the sinner. When they do the bad behavior, they're bad people. When they do good behavior, they're good people. They're not good or bad until they do good behavior or bad behavior. Right. So we focus on what they produce, not who they are. Right. And then interaction between that and the human gene expression allowed us to now understand what is causing people to have diabetes, what's causing people to have IBS, what's causing people to have depression. And then we started to say, hey, this food, when you give it to the microbiome, they produce this. So if they are producing sulfide and we don't want sulfide, how can they produce sulfide until I give them sulfate? What foods contain sulfate? Broccoli, cabbage, Brussels sprout. You got high sulfide? Don't give it to them. So literally we can say, hey, this is what's happening in your body and this is why you shouldn't eat this food.
Yeah.
Or you need these foods because we need to produce this. So we can very easily now give them the food and then we go through the what supplements your body needs, but they can't come from food. For example, we say, look, you have a lot of oxidative stress in your cells. You need a lot of antioxidative things like strawberry. But strawberry also contains compound that are histamine, and we're looking at your histamine, it's too high. I can't give you strawberry anymore.
Right. Me specifically, you're saying.
You specifically.
It could be different for someone
different
else.
Person. Yeah. So you're high histamine. We can give you strawberry. So I'm going to take 5-citin from a strawberry and give it to you.
Yeah.
Right? So put them in a supplement. So we literally make the supplements for each individual, taking the ingredients you need, vitamin, minerals, herbs, digestive enzyme, amino acid, whatever you need. We put them in a capsule and send it to you made for you only.
Yeah.
Right? The reason I'm talking about all that is with all that, we were able to now collect 750 trillion data points with 550,000 samples. Suddenly, we started to see the people who had this cancer always had the same biomarkers. We said that could be a great biomarker for diagnostic. We took that to FDA and showed them we can detect stage 1 cancer with 95% specificity and 90% plus sensitivity, stage 1 cancer. No one has ever done that. We got from FDA breakthrough device designation for that.
From the data you have.
From the data we had.
So just to go back, because this is talking about perseverance and exponential progress, right?
Yes.
You have 500,000 samples, 750 trillion data samples today.
Yeah.
But when you first started out, things were expensive. You didn't know if it was going to scale. You didn't have the data. There wasn't a lot that you were working with.
That's right.
And that's pretty much most entrepreneurs that are at that stage. even if they're working on an exponential problem. Seth Godin has a great book called The Dip, right?
Yeah.
Which he talks about whether you should quit.
Yes.
And exceptional people quit all the time.
Yeah.
You quit reading bad books.
Yeah.
You quit bad relationships. You quit bad businesses.
When to hold them, when to fold them.
Right. And that takes you to great places
Yeah.
that opportunity costs have.
Yeah.
So how do you know at that point? Maybe you're not at the exponential part yet. Maybe you're still at the slump. Your product sucks.
Yeah.
You don't have the data.
Yeah.
How do we know when we should persevere? What's the question we ask or to continue?
Yeah. So first thing you have to ask yourself is, are you moving in the right direction? So once you have a North Star, you know the path from A to B will never be a straight line path.
Yeah.
But are you actually moving in the direction of helping solve the problem or not, right? So think of an entrepreneurship as experimentation. How many experiments can you do as quickly and fail to know what is not going to work? So the faster you fail, the more experiments you are able to do because you have limited amount of money. So how do you do faster experiments? Say, that won't work, that won't work. So when Thomas Edison said it the best, I did not fail 1,000 times. I figured out the 1,000 different ways the light bulb does not work, and that allowed me to find the way it actually does work, right? So experimentation. So every entrepreneur, this is the trick. When you do something or when you create a hypothesis, always know, based on the outcome of that experiment, what would you do differently? Most entrepreneurs never ask the question. You say, we should do this. And we say, what if that fails? What lesson did you learn from it? What would you do differently? And if the answer is, I don't know, then you're doing the wrong experiment. Always experiment knowing what the next set of hypothesis is going to be from the outcome of that.
Right. Before you even start.
Before you start. So
Right.
people say, like, entrepreneur, I want to build this dashboard for my company. And my answer is, assume it's built. What decision will you make that is different from what you're making today? If the answer is nothing, then you're wasting your time.
Right. So assume it's built. That's kind of the question
Yeah.
you want to ask.
Yeah.
Assume you have it today.
Yeah.
You're a great storyteller. I think you're one of the best storytellers that I know in the entrepreneurship world, because you have a way to you don't talk about the product necessarily. Certainly that's important, but you talk about your own story. One of the stories that you talk about is your dad that had cancer with pancreatic cancer. I don't know if he's with us or
No,
not today.
unfortunately, we lost him.
But that was one of the inspirations that allowed you to start Viome. And it's one of the unique things about it. You're not just starting it to solve this big problem, but it's a problem that you had for your own self. What would you advise entrepreneurs or people that are trying to inspire others to resonate with their stories? How do we tell stories that allows you to build the talent that you need?
Well, first of all, it's first a great question. You can't inspire anyone. You need to be inspired. So unless you are inspired, you can't inspire anyone. Don't feel. You cannot make someone angry. You cannot make someone depressed. Only they have the power to make themselves depressed. Right. Only they have the power to make themselves angry, right? Yeah. So when you feel you can inspire someone, you're fooling yourself. What you do is you be inspired first. You go out there and show the energy you have. People latch on to your energy. People latch on to when they feel connected to you and they feel you're being authentic.
Yeah.
Lot of people go there and learn the art of talking, art storytelling, and they are not authentic. People are not stupid. They know when they're being sold something.
Especially today.
Today, their antenna is so sensitive. They know the first time they hear about, so you're trying to sell me something, right? They are very tuned to it. So to me, the best way, if you ever an entrepreneur want to be a salesperson, is really simple. Educate people. Tell your own inspiration of why you do what you do. People feel inspired by your journey, to be part of your journey, and they are inspired to buy your product. You never sell them your product. So never sell anything. You educate them, you inspired yourself to actually tell a story that people say, I want to be part of his journey.
Right.
I want to support him, right? And that's how your products get sold.
Do you think the mistake that entrepreneurs make is they think what they say and
what they believe they want to hear,
what the other people want to hear, and it becomes it's inauthentic to what they're saying, and people can they don't resonate
That's right.
with that.
Every
side.
time I'm second guessing, I think I should say this, that is what they would want to hear. No, I don't really care. I'm going to tell you how I feel about it. And that authenticity, people may disagree with you, but they still fall in love with you.
Right, because they know you're saying true to
Who
your
you are.
word.
Yeah.
The thing that I don't hear you talk a lot about in the interview, I know you talk about your kids, and we'd love to go to the stories of the great things that they're building and how you're educating them. But the thing that I haven't heard you talk too much about is the relationship that you have with your wife and how she's been able to be there along your journey and the impact that she's had in terms of the way you've thought. You talk about the heartbeat of when the ups are great, you feel amazing, but you're going to have downs, right? Being alive isn't the linear path that most people want. That means you're dead, right? You have the ups and you have the downs.
Well, you got that right. Pretty good.
In the down moments that you have in the 7 companies that you've built, 3 decades, 4 decades, what has been the impact that your wife has had in your journey? And what would you recommend for other entrepreneurs on this journey to look for when they look for partners?
So there are a couple of things I tell our children about. The 2 things which are really probably not sure what people want to hear. The 2 things, in my opinion, that changes the trajectory of who they become is the college they go to and the person they marry, right? Because it's not about that somehow Stanford has a better education than any other college. It is the people that they self-select who go to Stanford tend to be the people, when you surround yourself with that type of talent, you suddenly uplift yourself. That group of people who are already in the top 1% end up succeeding. And when you are in your 20s or 30s, all those people are entrepreneurs. They're all running a successful company. You have a network that's unprecedented.
Right.
Right. By the time you're 50s, they are running the large mega company. They are the same people, right? So you create a massive network, and you surrounded, and your mindset changed because you surrounded yourself with the smart people. And the person you marry, because that could be so toxic. As you said, as an entrepreneur, you spend so much of your energy into your business. Now, you need a supporting partner all throughout, knowing that you're going through the hard time. If they keep pushing you, you need a balance between a work life and a personal life, guess what happens? You suck at both.
Right.
Right?
Because your mind is wanting to do the business.
Or worse, you're trying to find a balance, and your spouse still thinks you're working too hard, and people at work thinks you're just not putting enough work, and you suck at both. So what I found in life is the work and life balance, by definition, when you say something is balanced, that means you already concluded they cannot live together. They are balanced because they're opposite of each other. That's why they have to be balanced. What if the life and work were continuum? In that continuum, there are days there are more of one, and there are days there is more of other, but there is never a balance.
Right.
When your kids need you, the work just have to wait, right? And when the work needs you, the kids just have to wait, right? And that balance needs to be there in a sense that it is a continuum where there's more of one or more of other, but never a balance. Now, since you brought up the kids, I do want to go there because to me as an entrepreneur, it is one of the biggest challenge we face and the biggest guilt we face about being entrepreneurs, because we feel we are not spending great time with our children. And how will our children think of us when they grow up? Right? And that guilt always makes us feel that maybe we are being a bad parents. Right? So so first of all, as you know, I have 3 children. Our oldest runs a company called Built, BILT, Built Rewards. And he fundamentally changed the way how people live in their apartments. He saw when he graduated that, Dad, we all are able to get a good job, pay for apartments. We feel we are wasting our money away and we never earn anything for it. So he said, what if you can create a credit card that has no points? There's no annual fee and no credit card fee when you put your rent. So there is no 2.5% fee. And I said, Uncle, the credit card companies make money from charging credit card fees. Why would they waive it? He said, Dad, because it makes sense for them to have that business they don't have today. Right? And, even me, who always believes everything is possible, I said, Uncle, that's a tough one, bro. And he said, no, Dad, I think this is a solvable problem.
Yeah.
And he convinced MasterCard to actually say, we'll waive the charge on a credit card fee.
And that's the why me, right?
Why?
You didn't know the needs that students have in those times,
right.
and he knew that.
He knew that, right?
Yeah.
So he was able to solve that problem. Now, my daughter, so he went to Wharton, and my daughter went to Stanford, and Stanford STEM fellow, Stanford Mayfield fellow. And I'll tell you a story about her when she was young, how this all happened. But she went on to do a first company using AI to remove gender bias. And now she's running a company called EVVY. And every woman or every man should go check it out. Every man for their wife, for their daughter, and every woman should go do EV. It's a vaginal microbiome company. She's solving the problem for women's health. And what she taught me, which really surprised me, was that until 93, women weren't even allowed to be in clinical research.
Yeah, I told me that's crazy.
Crazy.
That's
That
so
means
crazy.
the drugs that we are giving women are not tested for them. The diagnostic tests we have for women never tested on women. I mean, it's mind-boggling that
crazy.
in this day and age we had that, right? She said, Dad, I think we can solve the problem. Those 4 billion women on this earth need someone to help them, and I'm going to do that. My youngest one went to Stanford. He's a Schwarzman scholar. And he's running a company in Vallon, which is a completely rethinking how mortgages are done. Now, the reason I mentioned that is, what is it that we did that was so different than most entrepreneurs would do? And I call that a counterintuitive parenting. The first thing was, when the kids were young, I had just was finishing my first company, InfoSpace, went on to become a $40 billion company. And the only reason I mention is, I didn't need the money at that time. My kids were all under 10 years old.
Yeah.
I could easily would have said, hey, I'm going to now spend my time with my children because they are young and they need me. And I realized that, wait a sec, that is such a selfish thing to do, because what they would see will be very different. In their mind, when they go to school, they see Dad at home watching CNBC. They come back from school, Dad telling them to work hard, because that's what it takes to be successful. But Dad is sitting at home watching CNBC. In their mind, they're saying, I want to grow up just like my dad, sit at home, watch CNBC. Instead, Dad did the second company, the third company, the fourth company. Dad says, we're going to go to the moon. Dad, no private company has done that. Why are you so crazy? Well, let me show you how it is done. Wow, Dad, I can't believe. Now, NASA gave you $2.6 billion contract to go do that? I can't believe you did that.
Yeah.
Dad is going to go do healthcare. Dad, healthcare? What do you know about healthcare? Nothing. That is my biggest asset. Really, Dad. Show them how it's done. Guess what? In the children's mind, you don't have any kids, Sean, do you?
No.
Right. In children's mind, the parents are complete morons. I don't know about you. Every kid thinks their parents are not that smart.
Right.
And when the kids say, my parents are morons. If he can do this, we can do that as better.
Yeah.
And that's literally every kid did that, because they realize, if Dad can pull off this,
Yeah.
what can we do? Other thing was, we redefined success for them. We say success is never going to be defined by how much money you have in the bank. It's going to be defined by how many lives you improve. Your self-worth will never come from what you own. It comes from what you create. So you are born in, with a lot of money. You're still a parasite on humanity if you haven't created anything. So don't be a parasite. Don't be the hoarder of money. Go out and create something. Go out and make people's life better. We, in fact, our theme to them was, our love for you is unconditional, but our approval is not. Don't you ever worry. Do we love you? We love you. But I'm not going to tell you I'm proud of you unless you do things that make us proud of you.
I'm curious because this is one of the differences. I see a lot of people that start businesses as parents and they grew up with affluent kids, but you still don't have those kids that are as inspirational as they live in the shadows of their dad or their mom. And when you talk about approval, when your kids are now doing great things, you have to admit there is certainly an approval that you have, right, of them. So how was that for you? Like, who were you trying to get the approval of when you were first starting out?
So actually, it turns out we always are looking for our parents' approval. It doesn't matter how much you grow, you still want your parents, mom and dad, to say, I'm proud of you. Right? It is something inherently built into us. Now, what's very interesting is when it comes to approval, it is about self-love and it is about approval. It's really interesting. I believe we all have to fall in love with ourselves so much so we don't really care what other people think of us, right? That means when you love yourself enough, you don't care to look for someone's approval to pursue your own dreams. That means the day you fall in love with you is the day the world will fall in love with you, right? So that means you have to go do things that you want to pursue. But when it comes to parents, you always want to hear from them that you are on the right path. They approve of the things you're doing. Because at some point of time, as you grow up, you realize there is no one on this planet who would give you that unconditional love and tell you things that you may not want to hear. That's your parents. Right?
It's a tough one.
It's a tough one because they will always do what's right for you. And, I'm not suggesting there are some people who have had trauma from their parents. All I can say is don't think that's how most parents are. Most parents will die for their children. Very, very few parents who would not sacrifice their life for the children. I would any day. If I knew, if God were to come to me and say, your kids can live healthy for the rest of their lives, if you were to give up your life, I would say, take it right now. Right? That is something you would do unconditionally for your love. In fact, this is so tangent, but I want a story that still brings tears in my eyes is my mom who told me about what, mother's love means. And she told me that there's a kid who grew up to be a teenager who decided to join a gang and said, the gang said, you're not tough enough to join a gang. He said, what do I have to do to show you that I can do it? He said, go kill your mother, get your beating heart of your mother and you can bring it, then you're ready to join the gang. He goes there, rips apart mom's chest, brings the heart, holding the heart, and he's walking, he trips over and falls down. And here's the heart says, son, are you okay? She didn't care what he did. All she wanted to do was, are you okay because you tripped? Right? That's the mother's love you can never, ever forget. That unconditional love that she will always be there to take care of you. It doesn't matter what you do. Right?
Powerful.
Right. So my point I'm trying to make is that as parents, you give them that unconditional love, but you always guide them and let them know when they are on the wrong path. And that's what I mean by approval, is when they are doing something that you don't believe is the right path, you let them know, I'm not proud of you. If you're doing drugs, I'm not proud of you. You're going out and doing things that not improving people's life and you simply focus on making money, you still let them know, I'm not proud of you. Right? And that's what I mean.
Final question for you. So the Bible has the 10 Commandments. Buddhism has the 4 Noble Truths. When you look back at your life and the lessons that you've learned, what would you say are the 3 truths that you've learned about life when it comes to happiness, success?
Well, look, I haven't thought about it, but let me tell you that first truth I learned is there is no such thing as good or bad. When something happens, you just say it happened. You don't know it's good or bad for decades from now. Anytime, we all been, at a point in life and, you broke up with your first girlfriend and you thought that was the end of your life. And 10 years later, you look back and say, wow, what a nightmare we have wanted. Right? Every time. So the things are not good or bad. We won't know whether they're good or bad for a very long time. Second thing is you realize that happiness doesn't come from anything outside you. Happiness comes from inside you. And once you find the happiness inside you, you could be sitting in a dark corner and still be happy. And if you're unhappy inside, you could be in a paradise and still be unhappy, right? So always know, no one and nothing can make you happy. Only you get to make yourself happy, right? No one can make you angry. No one can make you, upset. No one can depress. The third truth I realize is that even though everyone believes the things that you may do are crazy, if you believe in that, you should continue pursuing your dreams, because you only fail when you give up. The only regret you will have in life will be the things you didn't do versus the things you actually did.
Powerful. Naveen,
Thank
really
you,
appreciate you having on.
Thank you, brother.
Powerful words.
Thank you.